Abstract. Marina Tsvetaeva thought the hardest part of her day would be the morning rush at her coffee shop, but when a rescue attempt in a freezing park pond goes wrong, she wakes up in a different world. Now inhabiting the body of the widely despised and recently murdered Duchess Violetta de Val, Marina finds herself in the middle of a deadly political conspiracy. With a target on her back and a small, terrified princess in her care, she must rely on Brutus, the bear, a surly mercenary who hates the woman she appears to be. In a kingdom where magic is rising and assassins lurk in every shadow, a barista's grit might be the only thing that can save the crown. The foam on the cappuccino was perfect, a glossy, micro-bubbled heart that sat resiliently atop the espresso, but Marina Tsvetaeva hardly had time to admire her handiwork before the bell above the door jingled aggressively. The Tuesday morning rush in the city center was less a flow of customers and more a stampede of caffeine-deprived zombies. Marina wiped her hands on her apron, the smell of roasted beans and cinnamon permanently etched into her skin, and smiled a practiced, weary smile. She loved the rhythm of the coffee shop, the hiss of a steam wand, the clatter of ceramic on saucers, but lately, she felt as though she were merely treading water, repeating the same motions while life flowed past her on the other side of the display window. Her break came 2 hours later, a precious 15-minute window where she could inhale fresh air instead of ground Arabica. She grabbed her coat and stepped out into the biting chill of late October. The city park across the street was a tapestry of gray and brown, the trees stripped bare by the autumn winds, looming over the ornamental pond that had already begun to glaze over with a thin, treacherous layer of ice. Marina walked along the edge, hugging her coat tighter, watching the few brave souls navigating the park rental catamarans that hadn't been docked for the winter yet. It was a foolish endeavor in this weather. As if on cue, a shrill yelp pierced the damp air. Marina's head snapped toward the sound. On a yellow plastic catamaran drifting 20 meters from the shore, a woman was screaming, pointing frantically at the dark water. A beige blur, a pug, fat and frantic, was bobbing in the freezing sludge, its paws scrabbling uselessly against the slick side of the boat. Without a thought, Marina moved. It wasn't heroism. It was an instinct honed by years of catching falling mugs and dodging scalding water. She sprinted to the edge, the gravel crunching loudly under her boots, and saw the dog's head submerge. The owner was useless, frozen in panic. Marina didn't stop at the bank. She hit the water with a splash that knocked the breath from her lungs, the cold gripping her like an iron vice. Her limbs felt heavy instantly, her jeans soaking up the freezing liquid as she waded, then swam, toward the struggling animal. She reached the pug, grabbing its harness, and heaved it upward toward the woman's outstretched hands. The dog was safe, but as Marina tried to kick back toward the shore, a cramp seized her leg, sharp and agonizing. The cold wasn't just around her, it was inside her, stopping her heart, dimming the gray sky.
She sank.
The water rushed into her nose, dark and final. The last thing she saw was the murky underbelly of the yellow catamaran before the darkness swallowed her whole. Then there was air. It wasn't the gasping, desperate intake of a drowning woman surfacing, but a violent, racking cough that expelled water from lungs that burned with a different kind of fire. Marina thrashed, her hands seeking the concrete edge of the park pond, but instead, her fingers clawed into wet, mossy stone. She wasn't in the still, stagnant pond anymore. She was being battered by a current so strong it threatened to smash her against the massive pylons of a bridge. She dragged herself up, vomiting water, her body feeling wrong, too heavy, too encumbered. She wasn't wearing her jeans and parka. She was weighed down by yards of sodden, heavy velvet that clung to her legs like lead weights. Panic, sharp and bright, cut through the disorientation. Marina scrambled up the muddy bank, collapsing onto the cobblestones of a bridge she didn't recognize. The air didn't smell of exhaust and autumn leaves. It smelled of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and ozone. She wiped her eyes, her vision clearing enough to see she was on a wide, ancient stone bridge spanning a roaring river. And she wasn't alone. 10 yards away, a scene from a nightmare was unfolding. A giant of a man, broad as a barn door with a beard that looked like a tangle of rusted wire, was holding a small child by the collar of her dress. The man was clad in battered leather armor, a massive sword strapped to his back. He looked like a bear walking on two legs, his face a mask of grim determination. Facing him were 3 men in polished silver armor, their swords drawn, advancing with lethal intent. "Hand her over, Brutus," one of the soldiers shouted, his voice echoing off the stone. "The regent wants the girl." The giant, Brutus, glanced at the rushing water below, then at the soldiers. He growled a low, animalistic sound. Better the river than the regent. Before Marina could comprehend the horror of his words, the man swung his massive arm and hurled the little girl over the parapet. "No!" The scream tore from Marina's throat. It wasn't her voice, it was higher, haughtier, but the terror was her own. The soldiers lunged, their blades biting into the space where the mercenary had just been, but Marina didn't watch the fight. She scrambled to the edge of the bridge, leaning over the low wall. The girl was plummeting toward the dark water, her small dress billowing like a tragic parachute. Marina didn't think. The muscle memory of the barista who caught falling glass kicked in, overridden by a frantic need to save a life that had carried over from one world to the next. She vaulted over the stone railing. The velvet skirt caught on the rough stone, tearing with a sound like a gunshot, but she fell, plunging into the icy river for the second time that day. She hit the water feet first, the shock less severe than the park pond but still brutal. She surfaced, frantically scanning the waves. There, a flash of white lace. Marina kicked hard, the heavy dress threatening to drag her down to the riverbed, but she fought it with a fury she didn't know she possessed. She reached the girl, grabbing her by the waist. The child was limp, eyes wide with shock. Arrows hissed into the water around them, zip zip zip, like angry hornets. Marina looked up to see crossbowmen on the bridge, aiming down. "Hold your breath," Marina commanded, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. She pulled the child under, swimming toward the shadow of the bridge piling where a tangle of driftwood and old tree roots had formed a natural barricade. They surfaced beneath the roots, hidden from the view of the bridge above. Marina pressed the girl against the slime-slicked stone, shielding her with her own body. They waited there for what felt like an eternity, listening to the shouts above, the clash of steel, and finally, the heavy thud of boots retreating. Only when the silence stretched for several minutes did Marina dare to move. Shivering violently, she dragged the girl and herself onto a muddy bank further downstream, away from the bridge. They collapsed onto the grass, coughing and retching. Marina lay on her back, staring up at a sky that was a shade of violet she had never seen on Earth. 2 moons, one pale and full, the other a shattered crescent, hung in the daylight sky. "Okay," Marina whispered, her teeth chattering. "Okay. Not Moscow. Definitely not Moscow." She sat up and looked at herself. The dress was a ruin, deep purple velvet embroidered with silver thread, now stained with mud and river slime. Her hands, she stared at them. They were pale, the fingers long and slender, manicured to perfection.
No coffee stands.
No callus on the index finger from the tamper. She touched her face. High cheekbones, a sharp nose, hair that fell in heavy, wet dark curls. "Who are you?" a small, trembling voice asked. Marina turned to the child. The girl was about 7, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes as blue as the summer sky. She was hugging herself, her teeth clicking together.
"I'm..."
"Marina," she started then hesitated. The soldiers had called the man Brutus. The man had thrown the girl to save her. Who was she? She looked down at her chest, feeling a strange draft. There, right over her heart, the heavy velvet bodice was torn. Not torn, sliced. A clean, vertical slit about an inch wide. Marina's breath hitched. She pulled the fabric aside with trembling fingers. The skin underneath was smooth, pale, unblemished, perfect. There was a hole in the dress where a dagger had entered. There was a hole in the shift beneath. but there was no wound on the body. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The woman whose body she was wearing, this duchess or whoever she was, had been stabbed. She had been killed. And somehow, in the moment of her death, Marina had stepped into the vacancy. "You're Duchess Violetta," the girl whispered, recoiling slightly, fear overriding her cold. "Everyone says you're wicked, that you beat your servants and poison your rivals." Marina, now Violetta, blinked. Wicked?
Great.
She was trapped in a fantasy world, in the body of a murder victim who was apparently the local villainess. I hit my head," Marina improvised, her voice trembling. "I don't remember being wicked, but I remember saving you. That counts for something, right?" The girl studied her suspiciously, then shivered violently. "I'm cold." "Me too," Marina said, standing up and wringing out the heavy skirt. She offered a hand to the girl.
Come on.
"We need to find shelter before we freeze, or those soldiers come back."
I'm Marina.
"I mean Violetta. Who are you?" "I am Princess Iris," the girl said, drawing herself up with surprising dignity for a wet rat. "But my grandfather calls me Iriska." "Iriska," Marina repeated, a pang of homesickness hitting her at the familiar-sounding diminutive. "All right, Iriska. Let's go." They walked for hours, sticking to the tree line, avoiding the main road. The landscape was beautiful but menacing, towering mountains in the distance, forests that seemed too dark, and strange birds that shrieked like laughing children. Marina's feet, encased in delicate leather slippers meant for ballroom floors, were bleeding by the time they spotted a dilapidated structure near a stream. It was an old watermill, its wheel broken and rotting, half sunk in the water. Smoke curled thinly from the chimney. "Stay behind me," Marina whispered, picking up a heavy stick. They approached the door.
Marina knocked.
It opened to reveal a hunched old man wrapped in sheepskins. He looked at them, a soaking wet noblewoman with a hole over her heart and a shivering child, with watery, calculating eyes. "Lost, miladies?" he rasped. "We were attacked by bandits," Marina lied, channeling what she hoped sounded like aristocratic authority. "We need warmth and food. I can pay." She fumbled with her ears, unlatching the heavy diamond earrings that she had only just noticed. She held them out. "These are worth a fortune. All we ask is bread and a place to dry off." The shepherd's eyes widened. He snatched the earrings with a greedy swiftness that made Marina's stomach turn.
Come in, come in."
Old Tomas won't turn away souls in need. The inside of the mill smelled of wet wool and mold, but there was a fire. Marina and Iriska huddled close to the flames. Tomas brought them a loaf of bread that was hard enough to use as a weapon and 2 woolen shawls that smelled of goat. Marina broke the bread, giving the larger piece to Iriska, who ate it ravenously. "Rest," Tomas said, retreating to the other side of the room. "I must tend to the flock." He slipped out the door. Marina watched him go, a knot of unease tightening in her chest.
Iriska, eat fast.
"We can't stay here." "But it's warm," the princess whined, her eyes drooping. "I know, sweetie, I know." But he took the earrings too quickly. And he didn't ask who we were. Marina's instincts, honed by years of reading people across a counter, were screaming. She stood up, intending to barricade the door, but it was too late. The sound of hooves thundered outside. The door exploded inward, splinters raining down on them. Marina threw herself over Iriska, shielding her with the goat shawl. Standing in the doorway were not the silver-clad soldiers, but men in crimson cloaks, the red kites, the personal guard of the regent. And behind them, cowering, was Tomas the shepherd, clutching a bag of coins. "There," Tomas pointed. "The witch and the brat." The captain of the guards drew his sword, stepping into the room. "Duchess Violetta, you are harder to kill than the rumors suggest, and you have the prize." He looked at Iriska with a sneer. "The regent will be pleased." Marina scrambled back, clutching the heavy stick, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. She had survived a dimension jump only to die in a dirty mill. "Don't touch her," Marina shouted, surprised by the ferocity in her own voice. The captain laughed. Or what? You'll enchant me with your famous, venomous tongue. He raised his sword. Suddenly, a massive shape darkened the doorway behind the guards. A roar, loud enough to shake the dust from the rafters, filled the small room. She's mine. A body flew past the captain, one of his guards, thrown like a rag doll against the millstones. Brutus stood there, the mercenary from the bridge, his eyes burning with a berserker's fury. He held a massive claymore in one hand as if it weighed nothing. The fight was brutal and short. Brutus moved with a terrifying grace for a man of his size. He parried a strike, punched the captain in the helmet with a gauntlet fist that sounded like a sledgehammer hitting an anvil, and kicked the last guard out into the stream. Silence fell over the mill, broken only by the crackling fire and Iriska's whimpers. Brutus turned slowly to face them. He was covered in blood, none of it his own. He loomed over Marina, his face twisting into a scowl of pure loathing. Violetta, he spat the name like a curse. I saw you go over the wall. I thought the river had finally done the world a favor. Marina swallowed hard, standing up to place herself between the giant and the girl. I'm not. Don't lie to me, witch, Brutus growled, stepping closer, the tip of his sword dripping onto the floorboards. You're a spy for Malvo. You tracked us here. Give me the girl.
No.
Iriska screamed. She scrambled up and wrapped her arms around Marina's waist, burying her face in the velvet ruins of the dress. Don't hurt her. She's my new mama. She saved me. Brutus froze. He looked at the child clinging to the woman he evidently despised, then looked at Marina's face. He saw the fear there, yes, but also a fierce protectiveness that didn't match the Duchess he knew. He lowered his sword an inch. New mama, he grunted. The Violetta de Val, I know, would have sold the girl for a bottle of wine and a new hat. People change, Marina said, her voice steady despite her trembling knees. Especially after they die. Brutus narrowed his eyes, his gaze flicking to the tear in her dress over her heart. He was a veteran. He knew a death blow when he saw one. He grunted, sheathing his sword with a metallic rasp. We can't stay. Malvo's hunters are everywhere. If you slow me down, Duchess, I'll leave you for the wolves. But the girl seems to want you, and the gods know she won't stop crying otherwise. He turned to the door. Move. They moved. The odd trio, a terrifying mercenary, a confused barista in a ruined gown, and a traumatized princess, trekked through the woods as dusk fell. Brutus set a grueling pace, but Marina gritted her teeth and kept up, carrying Iriska when the girl's legs gave out. Night had fully fallen when they reached the outskirts of a village. The sign above the establishment depicted a dwarf face-planting into a mug of ale, the drunken gnome. We rest here. For hours. No more, Brutus commanded. Keep your hood up, Violetta. If anyone recognizes you, we'll have a riot on our hands. The inn was warm, noisy, and smelled intensely of roasted garlic, stale beer, and adventure. It was the kind of place Marina had read about in books but never expected to see. They took a table in the shadowed corner. Brutus ordered a whole roasted chicken and a pitcher of ale, paying with coins he dug out of a hidden pouch. Marina ate with her hands, tearing into the chicken with a hunger that shocked her. Iriska fell asleep almost instantly on the bench, her head in Marina's lap. Brutus watched Marina eat, his expression unreadable. You eat like a starving soldier, not a duchess. I told you, Marina said, wiping grease from her lip. I'm not who you think I am. And I think you're playing a game, Brutus retorted, taking a long pull of ale. But for now, you're useful. Suddenly, Brutus went rigid. His hand flew to his shoulder, rubbing an old, jagged scar that ran up his neck. His eyes scanned the room, the pupils dilating. What is it? Marina asked, sensing the shift in tension. My scar, Brutus whispered, his voice low and dangerous. It burns when magic is used nearby. Someone is scrying for us. He kicked the bench back, grabbing Iriska with one arm and Marina's arm with the other. Upstairs.
Now.
They hurried up the creaking wooden stairs to the second floor. The hallway was empty, But the sounds of the common room below had stopped abruptly. The silence was worse than the noise. Brutus kicked open the door to a random room, rushing to the window. He threw the shutters open. Below was a large cart piled high with hay. "Jump," he ordered. "Are you crazy?"
Marina hissed.
"They are coming through the front door," Brutus said, drawing his sword. "I'll draw them off. You take the girl. Go to Zlatigrad, the free city. It's 3 days north." "Wait, you're leaving us?" Panic flared in Marina's chest. "I'm the bait," Brutus growled. He looked at her, and for a second, the hatred in his eyes softened to begrudging respect. "Keep her safe, or I will hunt you down myself." He shoved them toward the window. Marina grabbed Iriska, climbed onto the sill, and jumped. They landed with a soft whump in the dry hay. From inside the inn, chaos erupted. The sound of smashing furniture and Brutus's war cry, "Come and get it, you filth," echoed into the night. Marina didn't look back. She grabbed Iriska's hand and ran into the darkness, away from the shouting, toward the northern road. The next 2 days were a blur of misery. The velvet dress was heavy, itchy, and completely unsuited for hiking. Marina's feet were blistered, her stomach rumbled constantly, and Iriska was growing weaker. They slept in ditches and under hedgerows, terrified of every snapping twig. On the 3rd day, as they limped along a dusty road surrounded by golden wheat fields, a colorful wagon trundled up beside them. It was painted in garish yellows and reds, with the words "The Great Leonardo's Traveling Wonder Show" painted on the side. The driver pulled the reins. He was a young man, dashing in a roguish way, with a feathered cap and a smile that seemed to promise trouble. "Well, well," the man said, leaning down. "A noble woman dragging her heavy skirts through the dust, and a child who looks like she belongs in a palace. You ladies look like you're running from something interesting." Marina stiffened, stepping in front of Iriska. "We have no money." "I didn't ask for money," the man grinned, hopping down. He moved with a theatrical flair. "I am Leo, illusionist, actor, and occasional purveyor of truths. You look like you need a ride. And perhaps a disguise." He gestured to Marina's face. "The Duchess Violetta is quite famous. Even with the mud, the resemblance is striking. If you want to pass the checkpoint at Zlatigrad, you'll need better than dirt."
Marina hesitated.
He was obviously a con man, but her feet were bleeding and the checkpoint was miles away. "What do you want in return?" she asked suspiciously. Leo winked. "A good story. And maybe you can help me with my act. My assistant ran off with a juggler last week." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pot of paint and a brush. "But first, let's do something about that aristocratic nose. A wart, perhaps? Maybe 2. Marina sighed, the tension leaving her shoulders for the first time in days. She looked at Iriska, who was eyeing the colorful wagon with wonder. "Make it a big wart," Marina said, climbing onto the wagon bench. "And if you try anything funny, I'll push you off while we're moving." Leo laughed, a bright, genuine sound.
"Deal."
With a flick of his wrist, he helped them aboard. As the wagon lurched forward, Marina looked back at the road. Somewhere back there was Brutus. Somewhere back there was her old life. But as she watched Leo paint a hideous blemish on her cheek in a small hand mirror, she realized she was no longer just a barista. She was a fugitive, a guardian, and, apparently, a part of a traveling circus. "To Zlatigrad," Leo declared, snapping the reins. They were safe for now, but the capital was far away, and the sanctuary of 4 winds awaited them ahead, where the first truths of this strange world would be revealed. The door to the master's suite slammed shut, sealing out the cold, the shattered scorpions, and the rest of the world. Arthur didn't put her down. He carried her straight to the massive stone hearth where a fire was already roaring, consuming logs the size of small trees. He set her down on the thick, white fur rug that sprawled in front of the flames, his movements urgent. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands skimming over her arms, checking for stings. His eyes were no longer human. The pupils were blown wide, black voids surrounded by glowing ice blue irises. Did they touch you? No. Chloe breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. You froze them. You were amazing. Arthur let out a ragged breath, the adrenaline of the attack crashing into something darker, hotter. He looked down at her, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed with fear and cold, wrapped in his duvet. The barrier of employer and guest, incinerated in the heat of the fire. I told myself I would wait, Arthur growled, his voice rough with suppressed need. I signed that damned contract. I promised not to growl. Screw the contract, Chloe whispered, reaching up to grab the lapels of his shirt. Her inner fox was howling, demanding he claim her, demanding she feel alive after brushing so close to death. Growl at me, Arthur. Just don't leave me. He didn't need to be told twice. With a low, vibrating rumble that shook the floorboards, Arthur descended. The night became a blur of firelight and shadows. There were no political games here, no chancellors or shopkeepers. There was only skin against skin, the rough friction of his stubble, and the desperate, affirming rhythm of life asserting itself against the threat of death. When he finally claimed her, biting gently at the sensitive cord of her neck, the pleasure was so intense it felt like magic, ancient, binding, and absolute. Morning light filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, painting the room in stripes of gold and gray. Chloe woke to the sound of hushed voices. She was tucked securely into the massive four-poster bed, wearing one of Arthur's shirts that smelled of sandalwood and him. Arthur was standing by the door, fully dressed in his crisp suit, looking like the terrifying politician the world knew. He was speaking to a short, stout woman carrying a leather medical bag. She needs to be scanned immediately, Arthur was saying, his arms crossed. The woman, who had a nose that twitched curiously and round spectacles, bustled over. Arthur, stop hovering. You're blocking the light. I am Madame Pomfrey, dear, she said to Chloe. Head healer. And a hedgehog shifter. So don't try to outstubborn me. Chloe sat up, wincing slightly. The scorpions? Dealt with, Arthur said darkly. Just let her scan you. Madame Pomfrey passed a glowing crystal wand over Chloe's stomach. The wand hummed, turning a soft, pastel pink. Vital signs are strong, Pomfrey declared. Heartbeat is robust. And congratulations, Chancellor. It is a female. The silence in the room was deafening. Chloe looked at Arthur. The man of ice, the tyrant of the north, had gone completely still. He stared at the pink glow of the wand, and Chloe watched in shock as his stoic mask cracked. His eyes reddened. A single, solitary tear escaped, tracking down his cheek. A daughter, he whispered, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. He sank onto the edge of the bed, his hand hovering over her stomach, trembling slightly. My firstborn. A son. He died 10 years ago, before he took his first breath. I never thought. He buried his face in his hands. Chloe reached out, weaving her fingers through his silver hair. For the first time, she saw not the monster, but the man beneath the mantle of power. The tenderness lasted exactly 1 hour. Then, the Chancellor returned. Arthur held court in the library, his face a mask of stone. Chloe sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, sipping tea. Before them stood the head of security, Javier, a jaguar shifter who looked ready to bolt. It was the gardener's sons, Javier reported, keeping his head low. They confessed. They planted the mechanical scorpions. They were paid in cryptocurrency. By whom? Arthur's voice was soft, which was infinitely more terrifying than a shout. The trail leads to Sabrina's personal accounts. Arthur closed his eyes. Where is she? Restrained in the East Wing. Arthur stood up. Fire the gardener. Give the family severance, but tell them to run. If I see them in this hemisphere again, I will not be merciful. As for Sabrina, he turned to the window, looking out at the jagged peaks. Send her to the Monastery of Silence on Wind Peak. The nuns there are deaf. Her voice will have no power. Later, when they were alone, Chloe asked the question that had been gnawing at her. Sabrina said she was a siren, that you kept her close because she was useful. Arthur poured himself a drink, his hand steady. She is a siren. Her voice can enslave a weak mind. I didn't keep her because she was useful, Chloe. I kept her because she was dangerous. If I let her go, she would have sold her talent to the highest bidder. I thought I could contain her. Pity is a weakness I can no longer afford. He turned to her, his expression grim. You need to know the rest. The reason I am stronger than other alphas. The reason I froze those machines instantly. He rolled up his sleeve. Along his forearm, beneath the skin, faint blue markings pulsed, runes of the old world. I carry the blood of the firstborn snow leopards. The primals. We are closer to the elemental magic of the ice. But power attracts predators. The untamed shadows, an ancient guild of assassins, have hunted my bloodline for centuries. They don't want politics. They want extinction. Chloe shivered, pulling the blanket tighter. So, the scorpions were a test, Arthur finished. And we failed. They know you are here. To break the tension, and because Chloe insisted she needed tactile therapy, Arthur agreed to a brief excursion 2 days later. Wool, Arthur said flatly as the armored SUV navigated the snowy switchbacks down to the village. You want to risk assassination for alpaca wool? It's softer than cashmere, Arthur. And I need to knit a scarf. My neck is cold. He sighed, but his hand rested possessively on her knee the entire ride. The village was a picturesque cluster of timber houses buried in snow. The yarn shop, the Happy Skein, was empty save for an old woman who looked terrified when the Supreme Chancellor walked in. While Chloe cooed over skeins of midnight blue yarn, Arthur stood by the door, scanning the street, his body a coiled spring. Arthur, look. This one matches your eyes, Chloe said, holding up a icy blue ball of fluff. Charming, he clipped. Buy it. We leave in 2 minutes. They exited the shop, Chloe clutching her bag of wool triumphantly. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Snap. The sound was distinct, the release of a high-tension bowstring. Down. Arthur didn't think. He spun, grabbing Chloe and throwing his body over hers, curling around her like a shield. Thwack.
Thwack. Thwack.
3 bolts slammed into Arthur's back. He grunted, a wet, guttural sound, but he didn't buckle. The force of the impact drove them into the snow. Arthur, Chloe screamed, feeling warm blood soak into her gloves. Arthur looked up. On the roof of the bakery across the street, a figure in white camouflage was reloading a heavy crossbow. A roar ripped from Arthur's throat, a sound so loud it shattered the shop windows nearby. Stay here, he snarled. He didn't just shift. He exploded. Bones cracked and reformed in a millisecond. Fur erupted. Where the man had stood, a creature of nightmare now towered. It was a snow leopard, but twice the size of a grizzly bear, with fur like diamond dust and teeth like daggers. The giant leopard launched itself. It cleared the street in a single bound, landing on the bakery roof with a crash that caved in the shingles. The assassin didn't stand a chance. There was a scream, a flash of claws, and then silence. Back at the estate, the mood was somber. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed, shirtless. His back was a mess of bruises and puncture wounds. The arrows had been enchanted. They had pierced his tough hide, though his primal healing was already pushing them out. Stop squirming, Chloe scolded, her voice trembling as she dabbed antiseptic on a particularly nasty gash. It stings, the Supreme Chancellor grumbled. You took 3 arrows for me. A little rubbing alcohol won't kill you. She leaned in, blowing gently on the raw skin. Arthur went still. He turned his head, watching her over his shoulder. The look in his eyes was raw, stripped of all defenses. You stayed, he said softly. Most would have run when the arrows started flying. I told you, Chloe said, applying a bandage with shaky precision. I'm knitting a scarf. I can't knit if I'm running. Arthur reached back, catching her hand. He pulled her around until she stood between his knees. He pressed his forehead against her stomach. I gave you the wrong code, he murmured into her sweater. What? The Wi-Fi. It's Snoking 123. Call your friend Lola. Tell her you're safe. Chloe laughed, a watery sound, and hugged his head. It was a small gesture, but for a man like Arthur, giving her a line to the outside world was the ultimate surrender of control. The call to Lola involved 20 minutes of screaming, crying, and threats to castrate the Chancellor, followed by Lola asking if he had a hot brother. He did, apparently. That evening, the atmosphere shifted. Arthur ordered a private dinner in the solarium, under the glass ceiling revealing the starry night. He seemed nervous. He kept adjusting his cuffs. "Chloe," he began, pushing aside his untouched plate. "I am not a man of flowery words. I deal in contracts and absolutes." He stood up, walked around the table, and dropped to one knee. Chloe gasped, dropping her fork. "You are carrying my legacy," Arthur said, taking her hand. "But over the last week, you have become my sanity.
I don't just want you here as a guest.
I want you as my equal, my mate, my princess. Arthur, marry me, Chloe. Let me mark you. Let the world know that the fox belongs to the leopard, and the leopard belongs to the fox." "Yes," Chloe whispered, tears spilling over. "Yes, you big, grumpy cat." He was about to slip a ring, a diamond the size of a grape, onto her finger when the heavy oak doors burst open. Javier ran in, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. "Sir, emergency transmission." Arthur stood up, the ring clutched in his hand, his face hardening instantly. "Report. The monastery on Wind Peak was raided 10 minutes ago." Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. "Sabrina?" "Taken," Javier panted. "By the Hyena clan. They left a message. They want to trade. The siren for the territory of the southern mines. If you don't come personally, they'll send her back in pieces." Arthur cursed, a string of ancient profanities that made the air crackle. He looked at Chloe, torn. "Go," Chloe said, gripping his arm. "She's your responsibility. You can't let her die." "I can't leave you," he rasped. "Not now." "We can't stay here," Javier interrupted. "The estate's location is compromised. We need to move." Arthur made a decision. "Prepare the jet. We go to Snowguard. I'll drop Chloe at the safe house, then I go after the hyenas." The flight to the capital was tense, urgent, and fueled by the knowledge that they might be marching into a war. At 30,000 feet, over the sleeping world, Arthur unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled Chloe into the private cabin at the back of the jet. "I need to know you are mine," he whispered, pinning her against the wall. "If I don't come back." "Don't you dare talk like that," Chloe fiercely kissed him. There, high above the clouds, they sealed their engagement not with a ring, but with the ancient way. As climax shuddered through them, Arthur's teeth grazed the junction of her neck and shoulder. He bit down, not to wound, but to claim. A golden light flared where his teeth met her skin. The mating mark. She was his. And he was hers. Snowguard, the capital, was a fortress of steel and ice. But Arthur didn't go to the ice tower. He directed the driver to the outskirts, to a brutalist concrete mansion half buried in the side of a cliff. "My brother's home," Arthur explained as they hurried through the blast doors.
Gabriel.
The reception committee was chilly. Gabriel Sterling was leaner than Arthur, with darker hair and eyes that held no warmth. Beside him stood a sharp-faced woman, Elena, who Chloe vaguely recalled from tabloids as Arthur's ex-fiancée, and an elderly woman in a wheelchair who radiated terrifying authority, the matriarch. "So," Gabriel sneered, looking at Arthur, "the prodigal chancellor returns. And he brings a stray." "Watch your tongue, Gabriel," Arthur growled, his hand on Chloe's back. "This is Chloe, my mate, and she carries the air." The word, air, changed everything. The matriarch's eyes snapped to Chloe's stomach. "Bring her inside," the old woman commanded. "Arthur, you look like death." "I have to leave," Arthur said, checking his watch. "Sabrina has been taken. I have to clean up my mess." He turned to Chloe, cupping her face. "Gabriel's pack will protect you. I swear it.
Stay here.
Don't open the door for anyone but me." Come back to me, Chloe whispered, clutching his lapels. I'll be back for dinner, he promised. He kissed her, hard, desperate, and then turned and strode out into the night. The heavy steel doors boomed shut behind him. Chloe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Well, the matriarch said, her voice surprisingly gentle now. Come, child.
Seek.
You must be terrified. My son is difficult, but he loves fiercely. For the next hour, Chloe sat in the sterile living room, drinking tea with the matriarch, who turned out to be a sweet, lonely old woman hungry for news of a grandchild. Gabriel and Elena paced nearby, still hostile, but keeping their distance. The clock ticked. 1 hour.
2.
Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. A red light flashed. Gabriel walked to the monitor. It's the council ambassador. The doors opened. A pale, trembling official walked in, clutching a data pad. He looked at Gabriel, then at the matriarch, and finally, his pitying gaze landed on Chloe. Speak, the matriarch commanded. My lords, madam. The ambassador swallowed hard. We received a signal from the chancellor's transport. And Chloe stood up, the teacup rattling in her saucer. The helicopter, it was engaged by anti-aircraft fire over the hyena territories. It exploded midair. The ambassador lowered his head. There were no survivors. The chancellor is dead. The teacup slipped from Chloe's fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot, marking the end of the world.